Well, thank you all for joining. It's the first, I've given one presentation before on Zoom, but this is my first formal class. So it's work our way through this. So thank God for Rabbi Zoom. Well, where would we be without Zoom? And so just a brief introduction to what we're learning now with the tractate of Bava Basra, which is a section in Talmud which deals with law of transactions, ownership, Chesed Mishpat, and we began the third chapter, Chezkas Habatim. I'm going to make a presentation, a word, if an introduction. What is the concept of Chazakah for those who just joined for the first time? Chazakah. So the term Chazakah means, which is going to lead into our page 41, which is the middle of the third chapter of Chezkas Habatim, means uncontested occupancy of real property, like land or houses, that creates the legal presumption that the current occupant owns the occupied premises. Okay, that's uncontested occupancy. Now, the person's been in this property for house, property, land, been here for a while. We're going to say how much time he has to be here, and it hasn't been contested by anybody that it's not his and it belongs to someone else. And the Mishnah in the beginning of this whole section, what the rabbis came to was that it had to be 3 years, 3 consecutive years of uncontested occupancy of a real property that would create the legal presumption that the current occupant owns the occupied premises. Living for 3 years. Living for 3 years.
Sorry, some people are not having audio. Does everyone here have audio?
Everybody has audio?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that everybody turn off your speaker, mute your speaker, except for the rabbi.
Okay, thank you. That would be a first, but okay, I'll do it. That's good. I can say whatever I want. No, but I like to have it's hard because in the share is supposed to go back and forth. So hold your questions, and we'll set up a time when we can ask. So now, so like I said, so it's 3. So now in the area, this is all under the umbrella of transferring of ownership. This is what the discussion about Chazakah is about, transfer of ownership. For example, we transfer ownership through a mechira, sale. We transfer ownership by matana, by gifting, and we transfer ownership by inheritance. This would be like 3 umbrella kind of ways of transferring ownership from A to B, from person A to person B. It would be a sale, gift, inheritance. There's the other transferring of not necessarily ownership, of responsibility. For example, leasing, renting, schiras, sha'ila, borrowing an object from somebody. Number 2 would be the responsibility. If somebody wants to go off to Hawaii and you take responsibility to watch a shomer, that's called a shomer in halacha. I'm going to watch your home, I'm going to watch your car, whatever else I'm going to watch. So there's also a transferring, not necessarily of ownership, but let's say the term would be of responsibility of the object or of the house, of the property, whatever it is. So these are different forms of, like I said, transferring of ownership, transferring of responsibility, and the other process, how you transfer. And each one had its own kind of parameters and had its own kind of law, whether it's one of those which in the area of ownership, which automatically transfers more than any other kind of situation. It'd be like a child in an inheritance situation. One child from 2 parents. There's an automatic halachic transferring of ownership. Be more than one, there could be issues, but if there's one, halacha says it's an automatic transferring, meaning here we don't have so much the question of, do I have to do something in order for me to take ownership? In the area of mechira and matana, of a purchase, transferring, or matana, gifting, well, you have to do something, not just to say, verbal is not enough. When I say, I sell you this property, or I gift you this property, basic halacha allows you to say, sorry, I changed my mind. Unless there's some other maisa, a maisa kinyan, it's called, some kind of acquisition mode that transfers it. Whereas inheritance would be an automatic kind of more than mechira. The same way of responsibility, whether it's leasing or it's borrowing, is a meister. You have to do something. This is the discussion here. There has to be something, what we do, some kind of form of what validates the transferring from the audio, from the verbal, to comes to akiyud. You've got to do something to make that happen. Okay. So that's a whole discussion on halacha. So now we're talking about, let's get more focused on where we're up to in the Gemara. And I decided we'll learn from the Mishnah, and all those who are regular in the class. We'll come back to a different time when we'll make up I wanted to start from a new Mishnah. Now, there's a concept in halacha, in ownership, let's say, of property, where we talk about somebody who has been in a property for 3 uncontested years. Somebody's been living in a property, he's been plowing the property 3 consecutive years, and no one has told him anything. He's there in this property, no one said anything to him. Now, we're not talking about a squatter who's just living there on my property. Squatter, that's a whole different, this is going to be part of the discussion today. We're talking about someone living there, and suddenly somebody appears and says, hey, you're living in my property. Who gave you a right to live in my property for these years? He said, hey, wait a second. Now we have a discussion. If it's 1 year, the person who we know owned this property, not a question about that he owned it. The question is, does he own it now? But that he owned it, we know that he owned this property. The person now who's living in his property for a year has to say, in order to maintain what he says is his, you have to show some proof. The burden of proof is on the person living in the property. Some way he has to show that he bought the property. Whether there's witnesses, whether there's a ksab, there's a document, whatever the form in Allah is, the onus is on the person, if he's there, to the person who says, who is known to have been the owner, that you have to, what if he said 3 years? Here the halacha says it shifts. The burden of proof now shifts to the person coming along and saying to the person in the property, hey, now the person, you say you're the owner, we were here for 3 years. You let me plow, and 3 years, I'm sitting here, I got acreage, I'm doing all of the business of developing the land. Now it's you, the one who has to prove. Either you show me a document that you own it now, you bring witnesses that you own it now. I am sitting here. This is, okay. So here we have, this is what we've been discussing until now. The Mishnah today, where we're going to be learning now is, on page 41, is when a person has been living 3 years in this contested property, no one has said anything to the person. Now, the so-called owner, he says he's the owner, appears and says, hey, you're in my property, get out. What's the wording he has to say? So I'm going to start learning with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says as follows. Kol chazakah she'eni metaina. Any chazakah, uncontested occupancy of real property, not accompanied by a claim, any chazakah is not a meaning of chazakah. Does not entitle the occupant to keep the property. For example, what does that mean? The Mishnah is going to say, Kesat. What's this about? How is this? It says, Amalei, the person comes and appears to this person in the land and says to him, the previous owner says to the occupant, what are you doing in my property? You're in my property. And he replies, I'm here because no one ever said anything to me. That's it. So then the halacha says, the Mishnah says, Eina chazakah. This kind of statement that no one ever said anything to me, that's why I'm here, I want to continue to be here, that is not a meaningful chazakah, and he must vacate the land. Just to say, because no one said anything to me, that doesn't make it yours. Here the person who we know it did belong to him, saying to you, it's my land. You're not saying it's your land. You're not saying you're not the owner and it's my land. You're just saying, I've been living here for 3 years in my tent and been developing the land, and no one said anything to me. Well, that's not enough that you should take ownership of the land versus somebody who has we know has had ownership of the land. Okay. What about he called if I ever? However, the Mishnah continues. The Akim replied, "Shemachatali. You know why I'm in this land? Because you sold this land to me. You sold it." Or he said like this, or your father gave it to me as a gift. Then this is a chazakah, and the Akim keeps the property.
All right.
Comes for property. So I'm saying here it is. So here we have now. What? That's it. The question. Here we have somebody. We have. Remember, the person coming with a claim doesn't have proof that it's his now. That it's his now. We know that it once belonged to him. He doesn't have any proof it's his. The person here says he also doesn't have any proof that it's his. He doesn't have a document to say that he bought it, but he said it's his. So we have two people without proof beyond what they say, saying the property is theirs. You have the person who's sitting in the property for 3 years. He says, I bought this property from you, or your father gave it to me as a gift. And we know that this person's father had the property for a day or so, the Rambam says, and he says, well, it's mine. But it's only a verbal clash. There is no at all proof. No one can show witnesses and no one can show documents. My word against your word. But what I, living in the property, have is called a muhsar. I'm holding the land. I'm in here for 3 years, and you never came in 3 years to tell me anything. You never said anything to me whatsoever. So it's the burden of proof is on you if you want to remove me from this land to prove that this is your property, and we don't have any proof per se. There is no proof per se at all. Okay? So that's what's happening here. So when a person says you sold it to me, the burden of proof flips to the person coming and claiming it's his. If he doesn't say anything, he just said I was a squatter here for 3 years, no one said to me, well, then the burden of proof is to the person who's in the land. That's what the Mishnah says. Okay. Now, question. Let's envision this here. There's a question right here. Okay, we don't have proof either way. Is it Reuven? Is it Miriam's? Or is it Leah's? We don't know. We're sitting over here, the rabbi is sitting around, got adjudicator over here. We don't know. We've got a group, we have one person saying it's his, and we did know once upon a time it was his. That doesn't make it his now. This person said, it was yours, but I purchased it from you, and he's in the land. So even though the one who's claiming it's his, seemingly there is proof that we do know that he once owned it, but this fellow is sitting here 3 years in the land. He didn't say he purchased from him. He said, but I'm in here 3 years, and you didn't come in 3 years. Okay? Why do we say the burden of proof when he doesn't say he purchased it? Only he said, I've been here for 3 years. Why did the burden of proof now shift to the person there? We don't know. If we don't know, and this person's claim is weak because 3 years he didn't come, that's for sure. 3 years he didn't come and make a claim. That's 100%. Weakens his position even though once upon a time he owned it. He has been here for 3 years, he's a squatter. So there's a question, why don't we say it's hefka, it's ownerless, it's an ownerless piece of property. An ownerless piece of property reverts to the person who grabs it. Let's say, for example, there's these, we used to see the abandoned cars in the street, right? You used to drive by, boom, people left the cars. With hefka, it was an ownerless car, an ownerless auto. So what happens? The first person who comes and gets into the car and drives away the car takes ownership of the car. If there's no proof of who the owner is or if the person who is the owner walks away from it, and by leaving it like a junk piece, it's a statement that you walked away from the car. Why did you leave it there on the side of the street? Meaning that anybody can come take it. It becomes an ownerless object. Why don't we apply the same thing over here? We've got a question. There's a very strong case to be made that the person who we knew owned the property, although he once owned it, but 3 years he wasn't here. That's for sure. That's a halachic statement. The fellow who's in there doesn't say he bought it, but he said, I've been here for 3 years. You know what? We got a question. It's ownerless. And say the person who's living there, he's got it. He takes what you call ownership. He takes bias. He takes ownership of it because there's a question. There's a real serious question on the table. So why did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said, unless he says, I purchase it, the one who's in the property said, I purchased it from you, those 3 years don't mean anything as far as it being his. Well, it doesn't mean anything as far as being to the first guy. He didn't come for 3 years. You got a question. Let him keep it. Let the one who's in the property take ownership of it. Without hefka. Because it's an owner. We don't have any proof of anybody. If I'm sitting here like a rabbi, sitting around the table, we adjudicate these kind of things. Divad, we do. Say, why do you say the owner shifts? And if he can't somehow make more of his claim, it reverts back to the fellow who didn't show up for 3 years. That was a little bit of a Pilpul question that entered my mind today when I was, over Shabbat, I learned this. The Gemara says, too, and the Talmud says, that's just simple that it reverts. Why? If I was sitting around the court and I'd be an advocate for someone in New York or in Seattle, for someone, in this case, I would say, wait a second, why does it belong to the guy who wasn't here for 3 years? But why? Based on what? At the best, you should say, it doesn't belong to anybody. Why should you say that he gets it? He wasn't here for 3 years. But that you once owned it doesn't mean anything to me. The halacha of 3 years is still there. Okay, remember that question? That's what's called in the yeshiva. We float this and we go back and forth. I see, Catherine, you're smiling. This is the Pilpul kind of thing. This is what we go back and forth. We'll sit a whole day on this. Literally a whole day, 10 chevra, back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. Let's continue now with the Mishnah. Okay. Now we continue. Gemeres en Chazakah. But if he said, I bought it, then the Gemara, Haredu Chazakah. The last statement in the Mishnah is, anyone who claims onto a property by way of inheritance, they say, I inherited it. The Mishnah says, Eina tzarach taina does not require a supporting claim. Does not require a supporting claim. In a sense, the footnote says over here in 8, if you have the Gemara, if the occupant claims he inherited the property from his father, and he proves that he used the land for 3 years following his father's passing, he does not have to prove his father's title to the land. A son is not expected to be privy. Listen to this. This is from the Rambam. Listen to this concept. A son is not expected to be privy to his father's affairs. You hear the statement? Again, a son is not expected to be privy to his father's affairs. However, the Gemara below will state that he is required to produce witnesses that his father occupied the field for at least a day. Okay, you have to know that his father had it for at least a day. But look at that statement, what the Rambam says, which opens up a whole another discussion about a relationship between child and parent and son. He says a statement, it's not expected that a child would be privy to all what goes on. The father, he knows his father owned his property, but he doesn't know the documents, not documents, where they are. Don't make that assumption. When I wrote this, I raise a question. This statement, what the Rambam says, he says, a son is not expected to be privy to his father's affairs. Hey, wait a second. That's a very general, encompassing kind of statement from the Rambam. What about a father who's 95 years old? I mean, just a blanket statement, father. What about a father who's ill? What about a parent who's ill? Are you going to tell me that a father who's 55 years old, 60 years old, in the best of health, the son is 30 years old, 35 years old, in the same case that you say he's not expected to be privy to a father who's 95, 100 years old, the son is 65, 70, 80 years old. Are you saying this is the same kind of umbrella kind of statement like that? And the Rambam says it. I'm quoting you again what the Rambam says. His son is not expected to be privy to his father's affairs. And I learned that and say to myself, hey, wait a second. That's a very general kind of statement from the Rambam. Okay, again, I'm not ruling here. Part of the learning is to give you to think. all of you. The Pilpul, back and forth. This is yeshiva learning. This is not halacha, with Gemara learning. Second point. Now let's go to the Gemara. Like the Gemara says like this, Pshita, and then we're going to come to the Rambam. We'll learn the Rambam. We'll learn 2 Rambams, and we're going to have, according to my Rambam, there's a huge question on the table about the Rambam here, on this halacha. So let's learn one more part of the Gemara. So the Gemara, Pshita, this law is obvious. What's the obvious? This is the Gemara now on the Talmud, on the Mishnah. On the first law ruling in the Mishnah, if the occupant advances no claim of ownership, how can his occupancy demonstrate his right to it? Okay. What, in other words, why is the Mishnah telling us something which is so obvious that the occupant who has no claim of ownership, he doesn't say he's owner, he said, I only was here like a squatter for 3 years, no one said anything. Obviously it's not his. Well, I raised an issue why he could say, it's a question, but I'm saying this is what the Gemara says. The Gemara responds, Mao de Tema. You might have said, had the law not been taught, Hi Gava, why the Mishnah has to tell us this? Hi Gava, that perhaps this man, the occupant, did in fact buy this property from this challenger, from the one who came after 3 years. And he once had a deed, but it was lost. So if it was lost, why doesn't he say, I bought it from you, but I lost the deed? And I'm here for 3 years. I'm sure he knows, he's aware of the halacha of 3 years, right? And the reason he now states the other claim, that no one ever said anything to him without saying, I purchased it from you, which would then flip the onus on the one who's coming after 3 years and saying it's his. You have to prove it. Rather than claiming he purchased the land, Sava is because he thinks to himself, if I say that I purchased this land from the challenger, they will say to me, oh, you bought your deed. I no longer have it. I don't want to even go there. They're going to start draining me a cup. Where's your paperwork? Prove it's yours. You said you purchased. Show me your purchase. So I'd rather say, accordingly, you might think that so he said, they will say to me, okay, they said, show us the deed. Accordingly, you might think that we, the court, should say to the occupant, perhaps you had a deed and it was lost. Maybe you could, because maybe people will say to themselves, you know, I really bought it, but I lost it. I lost the deed. They're going to ask me, they're going to start raising questions about my name, about my belief, because you really trust him. So maybe the best would say, you know what, maybe you could begin, like it's called, begin with him to say, did you maybe you bought it? Maybe you had a deed and you lost it. For in such an instance, we should apply the principle, open your mouth on behalf of a mute. In the concept of halacha, it's a pasuk from Proverbs. Speak up on behalf of someone who cannot do so for himself, either because he's physically disabled or because he's legally disabled by the ignorance of the law or the circumstances of the case. This is a concept in halacha that Bezdin, let's say, for example, if the Jewish court is sitting, somebody's walking in and there's a claim back and forth, I buy it, you bought it, you leased it, you didn't lease it. He's somebody really who is not proficient, either because he's not proficient of law, he's not proficient of the world, how things operate. And the other guy walks in, the other person walks in, who's really proficient. He's got the law down, boom, 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 boom. So you see this person like trembling that he even have to come to the court. So you'd think maybe the court has to, you know, and there is such a concept, which is open your mouth on behalf of the mute to kind of lead him in some way, not lead him in say to him, ask him, could we find this in other areas of halacha? Maybe here too, to say to him, did you maybe purchase it or not? Just kind of be very neutral. You got to be very vague and neutral, because maybe the same thing would apply here. So the Gemara says no. You say no. Kamashmalan, therefore the Mishnah informs us that it is not the court's place to suggest such a claim to the document. Here in this case, we don't apply the concept of to speak up on behalf of someone who cannot do so for himself. Bezdin, the court, doesn't go there. Don't start. Leave it as it is. We got A and we got B. We got Joe, we got Mom, we got Leah, we got Dina. Don't go there. A is saying A, B is saying B. Deal on what they're saying or what they're not saying. That's it. Don't lead in any way. Do not lead in any way. That concept doesn't apply in this halacha. The Mela, that's what the Gemara is saying. Mishnah is telling us another chidush, that why we're telling us this halacha, because you have to just what you hear and rule on what you hear. That's what it says here. All right. Now, before I go further in the Mishnah, I want to read for you a Rambam. Yeah, the Rambam on this halacha. Okay, this is called Chazakah she'enim b'taina. This is the halachas toin v'nitan. These are laws which deals with the English translation of Torah is the laws governing disputes between the plaintiff and the defendant. That's the way the English translates this section of Rambam, toin v'nitan. So this Mishnah, which we just learned, is the halacha is Chazakah she'enim b'taina, that this is possession. There's no possession of property, but for the time necessary to establish a claim of ownership, but it's not accompanied by a claim of acquisition. Okay, so the Rambam says as follows. I'll read it for you line by line, word by word. Kol chazakah she'enim b'taina eina chazakah. Possession of property for the time necessary to establish a claim of ownership, meaning the 3 years, the 3 uninterrupted years, consecutive years, with no one coming and making a claim that you're sitting on their property, remember the 3 years, is of no consequence. Even if you sat there for 3 years and developed the land for 3 years, unless it is accompanied by a claim of acquisition. Unless you say, I purchased this land, but I don't have no proof. But not only am I here for 3 years, but I purchased the property, that's why I'm here for 3 years. Okay, that's what the Rambam says. Kesad. Now, I'll give an example. A person benefited from the produce of a field for several years. Afterwards, the person raising the protest comes and claims, as we learned in the Mishnah, how did you acquire this field? Shalihu, it's mine. You're on my property. Says the Rambam, the person in possession responds, I don't know who the owner is. And since no one said anything to me about it, I took possession of it. Said, I went into it. Now, the English says, and no one said anything to me about it, I took possession of it. This is a very important English word, meaning I took possession. I did a Maisa Kinyan. The Hebrew doesn't say that. No one said anything to me. I just went into it. The Hebrew doesn't say possession. The English says, I went down, I took possession of it. Because there's a difference between I come in to a property with the mindset I'm taking possession, Kinyan, acquisition, versus I just came in, I'm a squatter, I don't take possession, I'm just trying to get by, then no one throws me out. Hey, it's a nice place, I stood there for 3 years. Okay, the English says possession, Hebrew doesn't say possession. All right, let's continue now. Ein lu chazakah. The Rambam said, like our Mishnah, that is not considered a chazakah, it's not a chazakah. Why? Because he says, why? This does not establish his claim of ownership, for he's not claiming that he acquired it. That's mechira, purchase, that it was given to him, matana, gift, or that he inherited, Yerusha. He's not making that statement. He's not saying one of the 3 ways which ownership transfers, either purchase or by purchase or by gifting or by inheriting. Nevertheless, now listen what the Rambam is. Nevertheless, even though he does not issue such a demand, the field is not expropriated from him until the person protesting brings witnesses that the field belongs to him. Boom. What does the Rambam say? He says something the Mishnah does not say. Does not say. He says these words. Nevertheless, even though the one who is now in the property doesn't make a claim of ownership, but he says, I've been here for 3 years, and the Mishnah says if you don't say it, doesn't have a claim of ownership, it kind of reverts back. The onus now becomes on him to prove it's his. Rambam doesn't say that. Nevertheless, even though he does not issue such a demand, meaning he doesn't make such a claim, that of ownership, purchase, whatever, okay? So he said, even though he does not issue such a demand, the field is not, I underline not, expropriated from him until the person protesting, meaning the one who's coming after 3 years, brings witnesses that the field belongs to him. Where did Rambam get that from? Where did the Rambam get that from, honey? Where did the Rambam get that from?
Is there another Mishnah somewhere?
Doesn't say in the Mishnah. Does not.
I mean, it makes sense. Maybe there were so many cases where people came and knew that the guy was there, didn't buy it. He was just squatting and they wanted the land and they said it was theirs. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it makes some sense.
All I'm saying
or
is,
maybe in a broader, in the original setting, everybody knows whose land, like I know your house. If somebody showed up there, I'd be like, why is somebody at Rabbi Levitin's house? And then if 3 years passed ago, maybe he sold it to him. And that would be kind of the thing. So if you came back before 3 years, or came back and said, hey, what are you doing in my house? And he said, oh, well, nobody was here, so I took it. We'd know that it was yours and we didn't have anything. But now we live in a broader, maybe even in his time, in a broader situation where you don't necessarily know that was your place. Or maybe somebody else would show up and say
it's very, I don't say the word odd, that the Rambam would add something like that, which is a major difference.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a small difference.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying there's a major difference that even though, quote unquote, we'll call this person, for lack of a term, a squatter, doesn't say it's his at all. He just said, I ended up here, no one said anything to me for 3 years. And he is saying, well, wait a second, this is my property, okay? He has to say he cannot until the person brings witnesses that the field belongs to him. Now, the Rambam doesn't say witnesses that it belonged to him.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that is different.
It belongs to him now. Belonged, I understand? Because if somebody comes along and says, is this property, says the property. If you have to have some kind of proof that it once upon a time belonged to you. That's for sure, even the Mishnah said. The Rambam says here, as the English emphasizes, that it is now his. That's a tremendous that the Rambam adds with the Mishnah and the Gemara doesn't say at all. Mm-hmm. And this is a whole different kind of a Rambam, a whole different kind of a halacha. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically saying that it's as if he said he bought it because it's the same proof.
Listen to the next, Goldie. Listen to the next statement. He said it clearly again. When however he brings witnesses, the one who's coming after 3 years. Then the field goes back to this person who said this is. Not only that, all the benefit that the field goes back and all the benefit that he received from it is appropriated from the squatter. I mean, all the benefit. So it said the footnote, meaning all the 3 years that he benefited from this property and took out all the apples and all the pears and everything else and all the tomatoes, whatever else he took out of there. But he said, but since the field does not belong to him, he does not have the right to benefit from it either. That benefit is considered to have been stolen, quote, from the rightful owner and must be returned to him. You can just come on and for 3 years take. So listen, he says very clearly, hey, the Adam now. We're talking about bringing witnesses now, which the Rambam, the Mishnah, and the Gemara doesn't even mention at all. This is a chiddush from the Rambam. This is something new from the Rambam, which needs a lot of machshava. I had a chance to look into the later commentators on the Achronim on Rambam. But this learning the Rambam, and I learned the Gemara and the Mishnah, this is a tremendous chiddush from the Rambam. Now, I could understand the Rambam. I understand the Rambam. This because you once owned it, but you have no proof that you own it now, and he's been here 3 years. It's like my question I asked before. I said it should be like Hefka. But I'm saying is, let's even go deeper than Hefka, that is ownerless. Listen, there's a halacha which says, if a person doesn't come and claim a property for 3 years, that's a concept that it shifts from his being his, mine, shifts from his being to mine, we become the question, at least that. We don't know who it is, but it becomes the question if it's his. Because 3 years, it's not the norm for a person for 3 years to leave a property, cycle after cycle after cycle, and not come back. And unless, like we're going to see later the Rambam talks about. There's a war, there are exclusions.
Yeah.
Things like, maybe the time we live in now, a person can't come, whatever. But I'm saying that would also apply in this halacha. But to say that it's this person, the Mishnah said it's his, and the burden of proof, otherwise the burden of proof shifts to the fellow who's a squatter to prove more that it's his. I would say, like I said, you could say it's not the squatter's, but it's not his. That makes sense. But I'm going even further. I'm saying, as long as he doesn't bring witnesses, even though it was once his, okay, I wanted to share that Rambam with you. Let me continue.
Yeah, that's strange.
Okay. So, anybody else want to participate? Any thoughts before I move on?
Rabbi?
Yeah,
Rabbi?
go ahead, Bruce.
The question of witnesses is interesting. I'm thinking about the previous owner of the property who has proof that he owned it at one time, but his defense is, I didn't sell it to you. And one can't have witnesses to testify to a negative. You can't have two witnesses say, no, I was with the previous owner for the last 3 years, and I never saw him sell the property, because no one's with someone for 3 years. So are witnesses necessary to prove a negative?
Well, I want to understand what you mean by negative. Negative.
The current occupant of the property says, you sold the property to me. The former owner of the property says, I didn't sell the property to you. The former owner doesn't have any witnesses. He can't.
That he doesn't have witnesses that it's his right now.
No, he has witnesses to say he owned it. He's got a deed from 15 years ago.
Right.
But he can't have witnesses to deny that he sold the property.
Not a question, witness that he didn't deny he sold it, that he had the property once upon a time doesn't make it his now, especially, it doesn't make it his now after 3 years. That's the point. If the 1 year, the one who's in the property got to prove it. If you own a property, this is what the rabbis came up with. After a long discussion, we learned that 3 years is the cutoff, except for extraordinary situations like, well, we're in a war, whatever, okay? I raised an issue about 3 years. When we were learning, I said, well, what about social media, you know? Do you need 3 years? We're in a social media kind of environment. I mean, okay, but that's a whole separate discussion about social media. But 3 years is a fixed time, and there's certain have to be consecutive times. So there's it's there, he has it for 3 years. At the very least, if the person who was his property knew he wasn't going to be there for 3 years, it wasn't there, he should have kept proof of ownership. Because he had to understand that it would be a shift about who would be the owner. It would raise questions about his ownership. If for 3 years you don't come back and make a claim, could be people living there, whatever, you're going to have more proof it's yours.
But how do you prove it?
Well,
How do you prove you didn't sell it?
You have to have a document.
Well, how do you have a document that you didn't sell?
You have to have property that it's yours now, filed. You didn't sell. Then there's a certain process, but you have to have you can't just say you once owned it. You have to have proof that you own it now. The witnesses will come and say you own it. Whatever, however we find out that it's yours. But I mean, you can't say it's. Go ahead.
Was there a registry of properties? I mean, like if somebody said somebody didn't, sell it, it would be in the registry of properties.
I don't believe they had a computer about 1,000 years ago.
Well, I know exactly,
You have enough.
but you could have a book that had a registry of things.
I know. So how it was recorded or how they maintain it is a discussion in itself. But we're talking about there was a way of what it was, and even today, I'll give you an example. Especially things happened, like say during the war, Second World War. We had a lot of questions that the rabbis had to deal with after the war. Major issues. marriage.
Mhm.
The women came out of the camps, and this is the week of the end of the war, 75 years ago. They came out of Auschwitz. No one knew what happened to their husbands. Were they allowed to get married?
Mhm.
Because if they're, and men and symbol and there was a lot of situations. Inheritance was a big shaila, a big question. They
Mhm.
went back to the Shtetlach, and some places they went back for the first 2 years where they left Poland and left Hungary, but let's say they stayed, and they came and they found inheritance, that the land was still there, and the houses were still there, especially in Hungary and Romania, which was better than in Poland. And one child came home and said, "It's mine." Wait a second, what do you mean it's yours? Grandchildren came along and said, "My father maybe is still alive, so we have a share." Next generation. So this came a lot, and there was no files, obviously they couldn't.
Yeah.
They had to make a call, and the rabbis made a call. And one of the great luminaries after the war was the Klosenberger Rebbe, just for information. I want to mention him because, like I said, it's 75 years, May 1st, and this is when all the camps were all liberated now. He had to make the call. He made the call. He said after the war, I think with a year or two after the war, he said, the woman can get married. The men haven't come back, so they're now widows. They're not aishesses, they're not married women. They can remarry. And you know what? As far as my reading was, I don't know if there's one single case, maybe there was one, where later a husband came back and said, "I'm alive," with kind of a spiritual kind of call here, to take that kind of responsibility, to say, ladies, you can get married, you can remarry. And there isn't, you'd think maybe 100, 500, 50 would come back and say, how do you remarry? I'm here. No, it was just based on certain principles in halakha. Chazakah, meaning based when they got the information, they saw what happened in the camps, they knew that the odds were, that they weren't, if they didn't come out right away after year 2, 3, they did not survive. Based on that, he made a halakha call.
Mhm.
So, and this was that recorded, couldn't record anything.
Yeah.
So we have situations like that. So we have here, I share with you the Rambam. The Rambam, based on this Mishnah, I don't have an answer to this Rambam. So all of you can throughout the week do all your homework while you're home doing your stuff, get the holy books. Okay.
Which Rambam is this? Like, where is it?
The Rambam, I told you, Hilchot V'Nitan.
What?
This is Toon V'Nitan, chapter 11, halacha 2.
May I ask one question before we proceed?
Go ahead, Catherine.
So how would the rabbis take into account Rambam's commentary when he introduces something completely new that's not found in the Mishnah, if they're adjudicating something like this and he introduces
I want to be very
witnesses?
careful. This class is now a Gemara class. You know me. It's a Pilpul class. This is not a halacha class. I am not ruling. I'm just learning. We're learning together. We were learning Mishnah and we're learning Gemara and I'm bringing down Rambam, bringing down the Rajabam. This is not. We do not adjudicate in this class. That's a whole separate world.
Just curious if they would take that into account.
I'm not going to. I'm just going to say. But they say in the Yeshiva world, Ashvera Rambam. It's a difficult Rambam to understand what the Rambam said because I don't find a source to it. Maybe later on in the Gemara, but as of now, I haven't seen a source to this psak of the Rambam. Well, let's continue.
Okay.
How does it carry over into the Shulchan Aruch, or does it?
It does carry over to Shulchan Aruch, of course.
Yeah.
You have to,
And then how is it?
You have to take the Choshen Mishpat. You have to see there's probably other positions which maybe don't agree with the Rambam. And then the later rabbis, like the Rabbi Yosef Karo, Rabbi Ishla, even later, they will come to us. I mean, we had the great halachic authority in our generation. We have Moshe Feinstein, Allah Shalom, who I remember, and he a lot of new issues came to the fore in a lot of areas of law, and he, based on the principles of the previous generations, he gave a ruling, halachic ruling, and just about generally, he was universally accepted. Okay, I mean, there was always discussions.
Yeah.
Discussions.
I'm just like wondering if how it got, Oops, I'm talking to. I was just wondering, like, how, if it was used as how it came out once it came into the Shulchan Aruch.
They followed it. They would follow.
They followed. I'm not, okay. Yeah.
We today, the rabbis today, will open up the code. We're not going to open the Gemara. We're not going to open the Rambam. We're going to open it up to learn Torah.
Of course, yeah.
The Pilpul. But we're going to go to the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and we're going to get into that, and we're going to go back and forth, and the later commentators, and we have all the way, as we move on, out to the Shulchan Aruch, Mr. Brewer, others, we get to the bottom, then we're going to make a call. And you still have today situations which are left in a level of discussion, because there are different kind of rulings, and then it comes even further down, a little bit of a secret. There might be those, the Ashkenazim have a certain approach, Sephardim have a different approach, and Chassidim can have a different approach. I mean, there's a different in certain nuances. You won't have, rarely will you find it radical, but there are certain things where Ashkenazim and Sephardim, they go by different lineages of halakha authority, with Mechaber, Esav Karo, the Sephardim. Ashkenazim is their Ramam, and we are guided by Talmud Shulchan Aruch, which is, and others, that Mr. Brewer and all, but and I would say 90% of the later are very similar in Pesach, but there are areas, whether it's Shabbos or others, where there is a difference today. Okay, so now, so that's the Rambam. I wanted to share with you that Rambam, and now we'll continue. Okay, so now, next piece of Gemara. We'll learn another piece here. Turn the page if you haven't. It's the next page. Okay, a story. Gemara relates an incident, a story in which possession of property was invalidated because its supporting claim was deemed inadequate. We have a story. We find this many times in the Talmud. We have a discussion down, a story among the rabbis. Rav Anan Shokol Bitkabare, a flood swept through Rav Anan's land, washing away the boundary fences. Also, Rav Anan, his land went to repair the damage, and he inadvertently replaced the fence inside his neighbor's land. It means he took the land of his neighbors, where he made. Subsequently, the neighbor realized the error and demanded that the fence, he demanded by Rav Anan, that the fence be moved back to its original position between the two properties. Also, the comment of Rav Nachman. Rav Anan came before Rav Nachman for judgment. Interesting, right here, before we go to what Rav Anan said, what happens? Wait a second. Was there a question that he took somebody, that he moved it further into the other person's land? No. Rav Anan wasn't saying that this person, his neighbor, was wrong in saying that there was an error. Doesn't say he argued with that. What's the question? Are you asking because what's Rav Anan's shaila that are now coming to Rav Nachman, the rabbi, for a ruling? Are they in agreement that by error, the fence was moved into a piece of property which belonged to a neighbor, Rav Anan? So what's the shaila? Give it back to him, because you put up a fence for $1,000. That's not my problem. So what's the shaila? But it's a shaila. What do they do? Also, come to Rav Nachman. Rav Anan came before Rav Nachman for judgment. Amalei, Rav Nachman said to Rav Anan, Zil Hoda, go and return the fence to its former position. Well, what are you talking about? It belongs to the other fella. Oh, Rav Anan questioned the ruling of Rav Nachman. But I have established a chazakah on the land, and as much as my neighbor was aware that I had built the fence there, and he did not protest. And the footnote says, the neighbor assisted in rebuilding the fence, as the Gemara will state below. Thus, Rav Anan claimed that his neighbor's agreement to Rav Anan's placement of the fence inside his land meaning the neighbor's land, should constitute an agreement to allow Rav Anan, to keep the portion of land which he had inadvertently annexed. But then he says Rav Anan's construction of the fence would then constitute a kinyan chazakah, act of acquisition, which we're talking about. The neighbor's subsequent silence for a day or two before protesting should constitute a chazakah. Then he said the Gemara will discuss why such a chazakah should not take three years to establish. We're talking about 3 years with 1 or 2 days of chazakah. Okay, but this is the case we have. Okay, now I want to ask you a hypothetical. This which went through my mind. There's a flood. Never a tragedy. Talking about Banan. A flood. There was an honest mistake made here. The line was lost. They weren't sure. Okay. Okay. So wait a second. The line is lost, but they know it was a mistake. Rabbi Anan is not saying that there wasn't. Rabbi Anan is saying he knew that there was a mistake made. He didn't say anything about the new fence, and a day 2 or 3. So that should constitute that he allowed me that you can have that strip of whatever 5 feet, right? Okay, but it's a flood. Why would Rabbi Anan want to in a time of seemingly of crisis? Yeah, okay, he let you. But everybody agreed that it was his property. There's no shaila here about that. We're talking about days here.
Yeah.
So where's he coming from on this? What's he coming from on this? When I learned this, I was bothered by this story before he went to the Rav. And then he says, he's still arguing with the Rav. He's still arguing. He's going back and forth and having a discussion, a Talmudic discussion. We're talking about a flood. The guy thought you're going to grab 6 feet? Okay. So here, and maybe he put up an expensive fence of $1,000, $5,000. Who knows what he did there? Here, it's an interesting word. I thought like that. I thought on this story, right where we are right now. Alan was saying like this: I want a halachic ruling. You're asking for a chonus, compassion, flood. That's a whole different world. You want to appeal to me for maybe I'm part of my land too. That's different. But give me the straight and narrow halachic ruling on this kind of a case. So what I learned from this was you have to be very careful. What is Rabbi Anan teaching you? Rabbi Anan, he's teaching us that let's not confuse, or what's the word, conflate the word. What is halacha, dry halacha, and what's rachmanus? Rachmanus is rachmanus. Okay, sure. You want tzedakah? I'll give you tzedakah. But give me the black or white here. Don't lean on me on the black and white because of rachmanus. You want to talk rachmanus, but put each one in its category. Because many times what happens in situations of crisis is you say, give it to him, Nebuch, he's broken. Hey, wait a second. Let's get first the halacha down. Then you want to appeal to me, I'll hear it. But don't rule the halacha because of Rachmanis. Very deep difference. And that's being said to the Rabbonim is, don't make up, that's what Rabbi Anan, I feel, is saying. Do not give an issue, halachic, black or white ruling based on Rachmanis. Black or white is A, and B is compassion, tzedakah, and all. But first, let's decide who does it belong to. And he saw me, and he assisted me. The footnote said he assisted me in building this new Democratic line in his property, which is formed. That means he gave it to me. It's a deep kind of deal, because you would say, "Wow, I want to explain Rabbanan. You shouldn't walk away thinking Rabbanan, he took advantage of somebody during a flood. Is that right? Rabbanan did something like that." No, there's a lesson here. Not push, it's a lesson. We're in times that we're living like now, where there's so much compassion and so much should have compassion, and we should have compassion and all, but Rabbonim or others should have to be careful that the compassion should not impact the quality of your ruling on a black or white situation. That has to be ruled on its dimension. It's very hard for me to say that because I can get influenced by somebody standing there crying in front of me He took away 10 feet, I took away half a mile of my land, I see a woman sitting over there with 10 kids. You got me. I said, Nebuch, you're taking away half a mile, you're taking away a mile. I don't care that you sit there and you're tugging on my yeah. But it's an important lesson. Let's continue the story. Rabbi Anan questioned the ruling. But I have established Chazakah in the land, and it wasn't a neighbor where I had built the fence there, and he did not protest. Rabbi Nachman replied, Amalei. Rabbi Nachman said, Rabbi Anan, come on. According to whose view do you consider yourself to have established Chazakah? Could Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel? Seemingly according to the view of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel. What did they say? What did the great Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel say? Their position was seemingly that the Amna Kobafan of La'alta have a Chazakah, who say that any occupation of property that takes place in the presence of the previous owner without protest establishes Chazakah immediately. On this basis, you wish to claim a Chazakah after only one day of silence. Because it happened right in front of them. Like somebody walking in and taking out in your backyard, walks off with all your grapes. And you're sitting over there on the porch. And you see him walking in with a big basket. He's taking off all your grapes. And then he comes up a day too later, and doesn't say anything to you. He sees you walking with the grapes, and then 2 days later, he shows up in bed and says, hey, you took my grapes. I said, what are you talking about? You were sitting on your porch. You saw me take the grapes. You didn't say one word to me. Now you're coming to bed and you slept me to bed. So I don't have to wait 3 years for that. I have to come back 3 years in a row and take grapes. It's right in front of you, and you didn't say anything. So the Gemara continued. He says, on this page, you wish to claim Chazakah only after 1 day. So Rabbi Nachman answers, less Hilchot the halacha is not in accordance with their view. No. It says in 16, rather the halacha follow the opinion of the sages who will require 3 years of continuous use to establish a Chazakah on the land. Even if it's done in front of the owner and he participates, that doesn't establish what you did was right. If it was done 3 years, then it becomes a claim for you. But no, even if they participated, even if they helped you, I was saying, if he helped you build that into his property, what about he came down and helped to fill up your basket with grapes? And you say the same thing about grapes. He came down, filled up your basket with grapes too. You say you can come tomorrow to Bezdin, even though he helped you fill up grapes. The same way, like over here making the petition, he helped you. Yeah, you could say, I can help you with the grapes. Pay me for the grapes. Seemingly, that's being said here. Wait a second. We're not done yet. Rabbi Anan persisted. He's not done, Rabbi Anan. Rabbi Anan replied to Rabbi Nachman, well, Achel, but the neighbor relinquishes his right to their next land. The Asav Asayib Buddha B'chadoi, for he came and assisted me in rebuilding the fence. This was tantamount to offer me the land and telling me to acquire it. I don't understand what you're saying, Rabbi Nachman. He came, he assisted me. What are you saying? It's like he gifted me the land. He himself participating in putting up the fence in his previous own land, meaning that he gave me that land. So what are you saying? Why does it still belong to him? Nachman said, no. The claim was rejected as well. Amalei, Nachman replied to Rabbi Anan, the relinquishment was made in error and proves nothing. For you yourself, had you known that the fence was placed improperly, meaning another person's land, would not have done what you did to build your fence on his land. You said you did not realize because you're not a ganef. You wouldn't have done it consciously. You just didn't know. The water washed it all away. You made a mistake. So too your neighbor did not realize it. Thus, his assistance does not constitute a relinquishment of any right to the land, and the fence must be restored to its original position. You hear what goes on here? A story. He persisted back and forth. He says, and now after this statement, Rabbi Nachman, he doesn't come back with anything. He said, he got him. He said, you made a mistake too, right? You never would have gone and taken another piece of land. Knowingly, it's not yours. But you confused. Everything got confused, mixed up, right? the sugar, the whole place, and you took. You wouldn't have done it. So you made a mistake by doing it. You also made a mistake. He thought it was yours, or it wasn't yours. Everybody's never on that kind of a situation, but you would never done it consciously, and he wouldn't have done it consciously, because you're saying he helped you. You what? When you were doing it, you thought it's on your land. That's a deeper Shiloh. That's a whole different Pilpul. Go ahead.
So
Jolie.
it is denied on the basis that they both were confused as to what was happening.
Right.
Because if they hadn't both been confused, you would essentially be creating a seller's remorse kind of situation.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. And again, he thanked him, he was confused, you were confused. And I did another part here that I thought about right now. What he said to him, you were confused, right? You thought it was your property. So he was also confused. He thought it was your property, but now we know it was a mistake all around.
Mm-hmm.
Why? There's another element that's already in the Pilpul, in the area of transactions, okay? When person A purchases a property from person B, or gifts it, whatever, right? There's the Maisa HaKinyan, there's the act of acquisition that has to be done, which each one has its acts of acquisition, whether it's money, whether it's whatever. And there is the Das. What is going through your mind when you acquire? In other words, when I come and I purchase something from you, I know I'm coming to you and purchasing something which I do not now own. And this transaction, I know what I'm doing. I'm giving you X and I'm getting back Y. When I am doing something I do not know, that I don't have the clarity, the mind, it's not a question here only he didn't know he made a mistake. He lacked clarity of purchase. If maybe that's also being said here. There's no das. He doesn't have any das. He doesn't know. He doesn't have das. He doesn't have clarity. I can't say I purchased something knowing it wasn't mine. It's being transferred by I give and I take. No. So there was a lack of any kind of knowledge what I'm doing here, not just because I made a mistake and you made a mistake. No. There was another part here. There's a lack of, in the acquisition process, a full das. That's why I say, for example, a child. A child can't purchase according to halacha. Why? They're giving you cash, give them back. There's a question about that. Why? Because they lack in their mind the intellectual wherewithal to understand what they're doing and to make an acquisition. For example, they give stock, the person has to be of mind to be able to do that. So here, it's not only that he made a mistake. The question was, he never had the das. Rabbanan never had the das to purchase. Mm-hmm. Not just that he made a mistake, he never had the das, never had the mindset of a purchaser.
So that's another true kinyan.
That's another, make the kinyan, that the kinyan be a kinyan. That, I'm not sure if that's being said here by Rabbi Nachman or not, but there's another issue here. There was a lack of das. That would be in the Pilpul, the back and forth in the yeshiva over that. There was a lack of das. It has to be das. It has to be, you have to know what you have to have a proactive mindset of purchase. And I have to have a proactive mindset of sale. I have to be fully, a person who's drunk, for example, there's no purchase and there's no sell because the person wasn't of a das, of a right mind when he quote unquote sold or quote unquote when he purchased. Simchas Torah, we have l'chaim, in shul, all over the world they have l'chaim. Then they start auctioning off stuff from mixes. So I had the real Shiloh. Yeah, a guy from Alaska was here. This is going back 20 years ago, and he made a tremendous gift to the shul. And the guys were giving him drinks, boy, they were filling him up. And I'm seeing him drinking, and he's making $5,000. He's going. Well, after Yontif, he comes with me with his wife, and his wife, he's kind of very chagrined. He says, Rabbi, and she said she wasn't chagrined at all. She's angry at him. And she's angry at him. She's saying, Rabbi, they got him drunk. He gave $10,000 pledge to the shul. I mean, Rabbi, he wasn't of the mind. So I looked at him, I said, listen, and I knew this man could carry his drink. Tell me the truth. Answer me. Were you of mine or not when you made the pledge? I'm asking you this because I have to make a halachic ruling here. we're talking about Mom and Hagrid, we're talking about Tzedakah. I just want to know, were you of the mind when you made the pledge that you knew what you were doing or not? Answer me yes or no. You know what happened? His eyes dropped, and his wife is giving him the look. Looks could kill. That was the look. And I'm looking at him, going back 20 years probably. He's looking down. I'm looking straight at him. Tell me, were you of mine? And she doesn't know what to do. He's caught between the rabbi and his wife. So at the end of it, he says, you know, Rabbi, he said, I was of mind, but I can't afford that kind of amount. I said, that's a different kind of thing. Okay, whatever. But you were of the mind. I was of the mind. And he walked away from me, and his wife was going to probably strangle him if not for me. But he said, I was of the mind, but I cannot afford that kind of an amount. Okay, I said, we'll work it out. That's okay. Whatever you could do, you know, kind of, then I later called him. That was so you have to have das. You have to know what you're doing.
Tell him to try again.
So this is part of what we talked to. I raised this issue about das. Anyway, thank you very much. All a pleasure getting together again and learning. Really was.
Tell him it was.
Good to see you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good to learn with
We'll
you.
schedule again next Sunday, unless you hear differently. Next Sunday.
We'll
Next
try to
Sunday.
make it a little more smooth.
Sweet.
Thank you, Rabbi.
With admitting everybody, so I don't know exactly how that didn't work.
Thank you, Rabbi Levitin.
It worked in the
Thank
end,
you,
so
Rabbi.
it's good. Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.
Indeed.
Good to see you. Sarah,
Have a
take
good
care.
day.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Marty, take care, Marty. Good to see you. Take care, Marty. Mabel, good to see you.
Good to see you, Rabbi. All the best.
Jeanette, good to see you.
The problem was.